Kum Lena Blat Gemara. We are up to Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph on top of the page. So in the Mishnah we learned an argument between Rameh and Rabbi Yehuda regarding Ma'aser Sheni, regarding Hektish. Regarding Ma'aser Sheni, that's the 10% that you have to bring with you to the Shalayim. Rameh says if you gave that to a woman, she is not engaged to you at all because Ma'aser Sheni doesn't belong to you. Ma'aser Sheni belongs to Hashem. However, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda says if you did it b'shogeg, then it's not a valid Kiddushin, because if they would have realized, if he or she would have realized that this is really Ma'aser Sheni, they never would have accepted. However, but if b'mezid, if you did it deliberately, it means they knew it was Ma'aser Sheni and she's prepared to make the trek to Yerushalayim, then it's all right. Then we had an argument regarding Hektish. So by Hegdish, we had exactly, Rameh and Rabbi Yehuda argued the two opposites. By Hegdish, we say that according to Rameh, if you gave her Kiddushin b'mezid, you knew it was Hegdish money. And then she is Mekudesh. But if you didn't realize it, then you're not Mekudesh. And Rabbi Yehuda says the other way around. If you did it b'shogeg, it is Kiddushin. But if you did it b'mezid, it's not. And we had different ways of explaining Rameh why b'shogeg it's not Kiddushin. We had Rabbi Yochanan who said because either she or both of them, had they known it was Hektish money, they never would have done it. And then we had others who say that that's not pshat at all. And but generally, according to Rameh, makes no difference really b'shogeg or mezid. Hektish money you cannot use. And now we're up to the top of the page. Of Nun Hey Amud Aleph, the very top of the page. So we learned over there, Nan Hossam, we learned Behema. Okay, so before we talked about Ma'aser, now we're talking about Hektish. Tonight we learned over there. Behema Shenimtzas, you found an animal, Shalayim Lemigdal Eder. You found an animal roaming about outside of Yerushalayim, between Yerushalayim and Migdal Eder. So it's near Yerushalayim, but it's not in Yerushalayim. Chances are most animals that were in Yerushalayim have to do with karbanos. Why else would they be there? People bring animals to the Beis Hamikdash for a carbon. In any direction from Yerushalayim, north, east, south, west, that distance. And now you found an animal roaming about. You have no idea what the animal is. So the Mishnah says as follows: Zicharim, if it's a male, now even it's a carbon, not some karbanos are male, some are female, some can be both. So if this carbon is a male, then at the moment we think it's an oila. It's a carbon oila which you burn the entire thing on the mizbeach. If it's an akeva, if it's a female, then zivche shlamim. If it's a female, then probably it's a carbon shlamim. And therefore you have to treat it so. Ask the Gemara a question. But shlamim could be male or female. So if you see a male animal, how do you know it's an oila? Maybe it's a shlamim. Says the Gemara, you tell me if it's a male, it's an oila, not a shlamim. It's a shlamim. So when you see a female, okay, you assume that it's a shlamim. Can't be an oila. But if you see a male, you don't know what it is. It could be an oila, it could be a shlamim. A shlamim is an animal that you bring up, and most of the animals, the bulk of it is eaten by the owners. Very little goes on the mizbech. But an oila, on the other hand, the entire thing is consecrated on the mizbech. Omar Abayshir. So Rabbi said, I'll tell you what the case here is talking about. Somebody wants to swap the kedusha of the animal to money, and with that money he'll buy the correct carbon. And the question is, which carbon should he buy? So v'hachi carbon, this is how we read it. If it was a male animal roaming about and you swap the animal to money, so then we say, look, it could be it's an oila, but it could also be a shlamim. So you need to buy two animals. And you say as follows: if the correct animal was an oila, then the oila is fine. He's an oila, and the other animal will be a voluntary offering of a shlamim. If the correct animal is a shlamim, and this is the shlamim, then it'll be an oila offering. You can give an oilas nadava, and that's what you do. You actually bring both. We're talking about, but the main thing we're talking about here is that you're taking the kedusha off the hegdish, off the animal, and you're putting it onto money. Now, what you're doing now is you're doing it consciously. You're not doing it b'shogeg, you're doing it b'mezid. You know exactly what you're doing. Who says that b'mezid, you can take the money, you take the hegdish and swap it over to money? Not Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says it's only effective if it's a b'shogeg. You cannot do b'mezid. So it's Rameh. But I made it. I made the Amar Hegdish b'mezid mischal. If you do b'mezid, then the kedusha leaves the animal, gets transferred from the animal, and moves to the money, which is what you're doing here. And that's how we explain. That's what the Mishnah says. That's what Rabbi Ishia says. So the Gemara asks the question. In other words, Rabbi Ishia agrees with Rabbi Yechanan's sentiment that Rabbi Meir holds when it comes to Hegdish. B'mezid, it's effective to transfer the kedusha. It's only b'shegig not effective. Not like we learned yesterday, Bar Pada, who said, or it was before Yom Tov, Bar Pada, who says that a maid hold is never effective, not b'shegig, not b'mezid. And when our Mishnah says you could be mekadosh a woman with hegdish, is talking about the clothes of a kohen that's still using to be served. So those clothes there's no law of me'ilah, there's no law of stealing and everything else. That's why she is not mekudesh, because it never becomes the kohen's, because they made a special rule over there. Okay, so they were just trying to say that Aisha holds like Rabbi Yechanan, the Rameir makes that distinction between deliberate mazid or shagi. Says the Gemara, one thing I don't understand. You can go and redeem from hegdish, but an animal that is suitable to be a carbon and it was consecrated to be a carbon, you cannot take the kedusha, just redeem it. It's fixed. It's set for a carbon. Unless it has a mum, a blemish, you cannot bring the carbon. So what's going on there? What do you mean you're taking money and you're saying that the kedusha, whatever this animal is, which we're not sure of, it gets transferred this money? So the Gemara, kedusha haguf mimeschalo. Who says, even Rameir, how do you Rameir holds that you can transfer the kedusha from the animal to the money? I'll show you that Yehuda holds you can't, and I assume Rameir holds the same thing. They're arguing about when you can transfer, whether it's shegig or mazid, but the kedushas haguf, something that it essentially is holy, who says you can transfer? So, but now, didn't we learn? Ein moyer acha moyer b'mikdashim. When it comes to things which belong to the Beis Hamikdash Hegdish, once somebody stole it, you cannot steal it a second time, because once you stole it once, use it once, it becomes now ordinary. It's not mundane, and once it's mundane, the second time you use it, you're not taking away the kedusha. You're not doing me'ila at all. Says the Gemara. There are two exceptions. Behema, an animal that belongs to the mizbeach, even though you use it for yourself, it still remains kodesh. It does not lose that kedusha. So if a second person uses it, for example, give an example how. And also this is utensils used in the Beis Hamikdash. They're essentially holy, and even if you use it for your own purpose, it remains the product of the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore every person who uses it for their own personal use is committing a sin. Me'ila. Kate, for example, you were riding on an animal that belongs to the mizbeach that should be brought up as a carbon, and Bochaveda, it comes along his friend 10 minutes later, and he rides it, and Kulam Malu, they all sorry, so a friend came and used it, another friend came and used it. Kulam Malu, they're all stealing from the Beis Hamikdash. Why? Because it does not lose its kedusha. So our question is: you take money and you said the kedusha of the animal should transfer to money. It doesn't go. Another example: he drank from a golden cup that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. Each one came and drank. Kulam malu, they're all stealing. In other words, why? Because it always belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. Says the Gemara. Why can't we argue Ahi Rab Yehudi and Ha Rab Meir? Why can't we argue that view is Rabbi Yehuda, but we're discussing Rabbi Meir. And just like Rabbi Meir argues Rabbi Yehuda regarding Hegdish, whether the mazid you can transfer, maybe they're also arguing whether an animal which is set aside for the Mizbeach, can the Kedusha be removed or not? Says the Gemara, no, I don't like that. Rabbi Yehuda nishma Rabbi Meir. We think that in this respect, whatever Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Meir probably agrees. Lav Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, Hegdish. Rabbi Yehuda also holds that in principle you can transfer the kedusha from hegdish, things that belong to the Beis Hamikdash. But they arguing about bedek habayis, like for the maintenance of the Beis Hamikdash, or things that you, let's say, said I'm giving the value of this animal to the Beis Hamikdash. Kedusha is dummy. So Rabbi Yehuda and Meir are arguing, when is it Rabbi Yehuda says that you can only do that when it's b'mezid, when it's b'shegig, only when it's b'shegig, and Rabbi Yehuda holds only when it's b'mezid. But the principle is that you can. The question is only when. But Rabbi Yehuda says, but you cannot deconsecrate something that became kedushas haguf, that belonged to mizbeach. Where's the main argument on that? They both agree. So the same thing, just like Yehuda holds, you cannot deconsecrate something in a mayor. Even though the Hegdish b'mezid mischal, true that b'mezid Hegdish you can take the kedusha where Rabbi Meir says, but kedusha guf like mischala, but not when it's essentially holy. So go back to the Mishnah, this animal roaming about. We don't know what it is. What do you tell me a story that you take money and you set it aside and you say the kedusha of the animal transfers to this money? Says you want to know. It's a mistake here. There's a difference between the Mishnah that we're talking about where you can deconsecrate and the story of Rabbi Yehuda. What is that? In the case of Rabbi Yehuda, which we're talking about over here, you have no intention of keeping the animal. You're riding. You're using something that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash for. You want to ride somewhere. Okay, so therefore it remains the property of the Beis Hamikdash. However, over here, your whole intention is that we don't know what this animal is. I want the kedusha of the animal to transfer to the money so I can do the right thing. So here I want the kedusha to leave. And that's why in this case, even though it's Gusar Guf, you can actually transfer the kedusha from the animal to the money. Says the Gemara, okay, but maybe when does Rameya say that you can actively remove the kedusha b'koche? When it comes to a carbon that you can only eat inside the Beis Hamikdash, for example, carbon oil or something like that. When it comes to a carbon shlamim, which you can eat in the Taya Shalayim, who said Rameya holds that you can deconsecrate the animal? Says Gemara, of course you can. Kachim kalim has much less kedusha in it than kachim kachim. That's why kachim you're limited to eat it only in the Beis Hamikdash, and kachim kalim you can eat it throughout the entire Yerushalayim. So if something which is so holy, like kodesh kedoshim, you can still remove the kedusha where you intend to, then surely kachim kalim like a shlamim, if you intend to remove the kedusha, you can. One of the rabbis answered his name, Rabbi Yaakov. It makes sense logically. Kachim is chalim, something which is a holy can be that you can deconsecrate. Kachim kalim, surely kachim kalim. We looked at similar things. Rameh used to say, Higdish b'mezid mizchal. If you made Higdish b'mezid, you can remove the kedusha. B'sheigig a mizchal, but if it's b'sheigig, you cannot. Echad kochi kochi, echad kochim kalim. Whether it's kochi kochi, whether it's kochi kalim, kal v'chayme kochim mizchal and kochi kalim koshkein. If kochi kochim can be the kedusha can be removed, then surely kochim kalim the kedusha can be removed. There's the Gemara. Tehiba Rabbi Yechanan was wondering about Aisha. So what are you telling me? You're telling me go take money and take the kedusha away from the animal. But the fact is, I'm still doing an avera because you're not allowed to be moil, steal from the Beis Hamikdash or transfer the kedusha while it's unblemished. You have to wait till it has a mum, and you're encouraging this person here to go ahead and transfer the kedusha from the animal to the money so that they can bring an oil and a shlamim. How can you do that? Tehiba Rabbi Yechanan was wondering, do we tell a person, go ahead and sin, in order that that you want to help somebody out and take this animal that's roaming about and turning into a karbonis? El Rabbi Yechanan therefore says, Mamtin, you have to wait. Take this animal, put it in your pen somewhere, and wait until it has a blemish. Once it has a blemish, then you can go ahead and redeem it. And you might see then you bring the two animals and you say, well, if it's an oila, this is the oila. If it's a shlamim, this is the shlamim. The other one is a shlamim and the other one is a voluntary card. Now we're going to analyze. Now we're digressing now. You said there's two possibilities, oila or shlamim. And the Gemara is going to say there's so many other kabbanas. Why maybe it's a third carbon? How do you know it's limited to these two kabbanas? Says the Gemara. We learn, if it's a male carbon, you say it's oilus. It's a carbon oila. We said if it's it could also be a shlamim, so it's either an oila or shlamim, and a female can only be a shlamim. So our question is as follows: maybe it's a carbon toida, thanks offering. Now, if it's a carbon toida, you can use one animal and say this is either a toida or a shlamim, but you can't really, because according to some, because the time allowed to eat a carbon toida is only day and night. A carbon shlamim is 2 days and 1 night, so it's not the same. And according to many poskim, you cannot limit even when trying to help out, you cannot limit the time that you're supposed to eat. If it's a shlamim and you're bringing it down, you're reducing the time you can eat it to a day and a night. That's the wrong thing to do. So therefore, we cannot use the same animal. Others disagree with that, but they say the problem is you have to bring 40 chalas. And if it's a shlamim, you don't bring 40 chalas. If it's a tay, you do bring chalas. So what do you do? And what are you going to say? If this animal is a shlamim, then the 40 chalas are a donation. The animal will tell you the 40 chalas are part of it. There's no such thing as a donation of 40 chalas, which is a problem. So therefore, we're talking about over here is bring a third animal. Why are two animals sufficient? Bring a third animal and make it a taida with 40 chalas. Says you want to you need chalas. Bring a third animal with 40 chalas. You want to be a nice guy, it's going to cost you a fortune. You're going to have to bring a carbon oila, a carbon shlamim, a third animal, a carbon taida with 40 chalas, 40 matzahs. Says the Gemara, okay. So you're right. We do that. So you bring 3 animals. Says the Gemara, wasn't you need a 4th animal? The Dilma Asham, maybe it's a carbon Asham, and a carbon Asham, again, you cannot share a shlamim with a carbon Asham, even though the sprinkling on the Mizbech is the same. And even though there are differences, for example, you don't lean on a carbon Asham, but it's not a big deal if you don't lean. So why don't we use it? Why don't we just use 1 animal? Why bring a 4th animal? The reason for that is because by a carbon shlamim, you bring the sachim, certain wine libations, and you don't do that for an Asham. And therefore, you cannot say this animal should be an ashik for nashim. What are you going to do with the wine libations? So bring a 4th animal. So the Gemara asham ben shtei shanim. We know for sure it's not an asham because this is a 1-year-old animal, and 1-year-old animal can be a chatas, but an asham has to be an older animal, 2 years old. Vishtaka ben shanim. But they found it was a year-old animal. So the Gemara, okay. Maybe this is the guilt offering that a mitzvah brings, or Asham Nazir. Maybe this is the guild offering that a Nazir brings. And these 2 are actually a year old because it's only a lamb. It's not yet a ram. It's a young animal, a year old. So maybe that's what it is. So bring a 5th carbon if you want to cover all your bases. So far we have Oila, Shlamim, and Toida. You should have a 4th carbon. Sorry, a carbon Asham Mitzayda or Asham Nazir. So the Gemara, Asham Nazir the Loish Kichi. These are uncommon. A Mitzayra or a Nazir are uncommon. Therefore, we're not going to suspect that this roaming animal is one of those. So, okay, but Vidilma we should still bring a 4th animal because maybe it's a carbon Pesach. They got lost or something. And therefore, you should bring an animal carbon Pesach. Says the Gemara, Pesach bizmanoi miza zehirabe. Pesach, in its time, people are generally very careful with the carbon Pesach, and they make sure they bring it on time. So there's no reason to be worried and think, oh, maybe this animal is a Korban Pesach. Says the Gemara, and if, let's say, it's past Pesach, what happens to a Korban Pesach that was designated to be Korban Pesach, and then you didn't bring it up in Pesach? It turns into a Shlamim. Well, you bring a Shlamim anyway. So therefore, it's not a big issue. Traces and all the Rishonim ask a brilliant question. If people are careful with the Korban Pesach, how does it ever turn into a shlamim after Pesach? It never happens because you're careful with the Pesach. You'll bring it before Pesach. So a number of answers are either that the owner became tamei and therefore couldn't bring it before Pesach, had no choice. So that's why this animal comes to shlamim. Or maybe the animal got some transient blemish that disallowed them from bringing it at Pesach, but after Pesach they could, so now it's a shlamim. Or got lost and they brought another one. Or he brought 2 animals, one to be the animal, one in case he got lost, he has another one as a backup plan. Okay, so therefore, when I worry, because it doesn't happen often.
Sorry, can I just ask, who are we talking about? There's this animal that's wandering about, it's like Hefka, and someone finds it. Why should they be responsible to do anything? They can just...
They're not responsible at all. But if this person wants to do the right thing, and we're, I guess, encouraging, you want this animal is roaming about. It could very well be it's a holy animal, a consecrated animal. So therefore, we should fix it up. We don't know who the owner is. We don't know anything about it. So if you want to do the right thing, let's bring it up to the Mizbech. So now we're saying the right thing is going to cost you an absolute arm and a leg. Because you're going to have to bring a carbon oila, a carbon shlamim, and we also said a carbon taida with 40 matzahs. And now we're trying to pile up more possibilities.
So who would do that?
That's another
if
question.
If they saw an animal, they'd run away.
Okay, true. So I guess let's say it's theoretical. But there are good people out there who want to do the right thing. Says Gemara, maybe it's a b'chor. Maybe it's a firstborn animal that just wandered about, or maybe mice and the 10th animal and that you're supposed to bring up as a carbon and just wandered about, and that's what it is. Says the Gemara, answers the Gemara. So what do you want us to do? You cannot take bring another b'chor in this place, right? You cannot buy an animal of b'chor. So what do you want us to do? Let's say it is a b'chor. Let's say it's a mice. So what? What do you want us to do? Says the Gemara, that this animal itself you can actually eat. Wait till it has a blemish, and you can eat it with its mum, because a suffix b'chayr, you're allowed to eat it once it has a mum to the original owners, right? Because you cannot redeem it. Says the Gemara. So maybe you can eat this animal as with a blemish. So hachinami mum mizachli. Let's eat this animal with a blemish. The Gemara says you're right. We do. We do. So the bottom line is, the Gemara concludes, maybe it's a Char Maisa, so you have to wait for a blemish to eat it. But you bring up an Oila, and Rabbi Yechon already said you have to wait anyway for a blemish in order to take the money and redeem some of those things. If it's an Oila or a Shlamim or a carbon taita, and then maybe it itself is a Char, so then eat that animal. You took the Kedusha away, right? Because you bought all these other animals there. But the animal itself might be a B'char, so you can eat this animal, treat it as a B'char. And wait till it has which anyway you're waiting, and then eat it. Oh, man. You said also Nikeva. Okay, that was the male. You said if it's a female, then you said Zivche Shlamim, because a female can be a carbon oiler, so you limit it only to one option. You bring one animal, Shlamim, say this is in lieu of that. So but the same question before, maybe it's a taida. So we said the Maisi taida. Same thing before. Yes, you bring a second animal taida. What being lechem? The Maisi not a lechem. You bring matzahs. The dilma chatasi. So maybe it's a carbon chatas. Right? Maybe it's a carbon chatas. A chatas also is a female. How do you know it's a carbon shlamim? So we answer, the case of the female is different, because a chatas is a year-old, and this is a 2-year-old. Chatas bash nosa. The ishtaka, what we found was bash shteishon. A carbon osham is a male, so it can be an osham. And since it's a 2-year-old, it's not a chatas anymore. So the only possibility is that it's a shlamim. So what do you mean? Maybe it's a chatas that's been around for a long time. It started out a year-old, and now it's 2 years old. And therefore, you should bring another animal, treat it like a chatas, and take the kedusha. The guy consecrated in time, but now it's just hanging around. So the Gemara, it's not common for this animal to turn 2 years old. So the Gemara, what happened to Shtaka Bashnas? Okay, so you're telling me we're talking about a 2-year-old, and that's why the only option is a carbon shlam. Fine. But what happens if you find a female that's a year-old? What happens then? A female a year-old could be a chatas as well. Tanya a goat that's 1 year old is a chatas. Now it sounds from here that the only thing you do with it is a chatas, even though we learned before there's a possibility it's a shlamim. He says, well, it's a year old, it's a chatas. How can you bring it for a carbon chatas? First of all, who said it's even a chatas? Maybe it's a carbon shlamim. And the chatas you can't make. Oh well, if it's a chatas, if it's a shlamim, I'm going to donate this as an optional chatas. You can't do that. So what do? So what you do is you treat it like a chatas. You buy one animal, you bring it as a shlamim, but you say maybe it's a chatas. And if it's a chatas, what is it done by a chatas that we don't know who the owner is or the owner died? You put it in the pen and you let it die. 5 different chatos that we let die, and this will be one of them. Kechatas, you put it into a jail, into a pen or something. You stop feeding it, and eventually it dies.